What happens when a young black boy, overlooked and ridiculed by a racist math teacher, steps forward to prove his undeniable worth? Rashad Tate, a quiet yet exceptionally brilliant boy, finds himself in the spotlight, facing the ultimate challenge. The pressure is immense. An all-white audience surrounds him, with none other than the man who doubted him most sitting front and center. Will Rashad falter, overwhelmed by the weight of expectations? Or will he deliver a performance so extraordinary that it leaves everyone in shock, rewriting every biased assumption? And, perhaps most intriguingly, how will the teacher react when Rashad's true genius is unveiled? Stay tuned as we dive deep into the gripping details of this powerful story. It was the first day of school at Magnolia Hills Academy, a prestigious private school nestled in the heart of a wealthy Georgian suburb. Room 204 seemed like any other classroom, except for one glaring difference. It was entirely filled with white students, except for 12-year-old Rashad Tate. He stood hesitantly at the doorway, clutching his backpack, so tightly his knuckles turned white. His deep brown eyes darted nervously around the room, searching for something, anything, that might offer comfort. The teacher, Mr. Vernon Chase, a man whose demeanor was as stern as his graying suit, gestured for Rashad to step inside. "Class," Mr. Chase announced in a clipped, formal tone, "this is Rashad Tate. He'll be joining us this year. Rashad, take that seat in the back." Without a word, Rashad nodded, his throat dry, and shuffled to the lone desk by the window. He could feel every eye in the room on him, the weight of judgment heavy on his small shoulders. Then came the whispers, quiet but cutting, like daggers aimed at his confidence. "Do you think he's on a scholarship? That he can't even afford to eat lunch here? Why would they even let him in?" Mr. Chase heard them, there was no doubt about that, but he didn't bother addressing the murmurs. Instead, he adjusted his glasses, turned to the chalkboard, and began scribbling an intimidating equation. The silent message was clear. "Rashad, you're on your own." From the very start, Rashad could tell Mr. Chase didn't like him. It wasn't anything overt, no direct insults or obvious slurs. Instead, it was in the subtle, unspoken actions that spoke volumes. Whenever Rashad raised his hand, Mr. Chase seemed to glance past him, deliberately calling on someone else. When Rashad asked a question, the teacher's response often came with a loud, impatient sigh, as if even engaging with him was a chore. And when he submitted his work, it always came back marked with overly critical comments, even when Rashad knew his answers were right. The tension reached a boiling point one afternoon during a particularly challenging lesson on quadratic equations. Mr. Chase had just finished writing a series of steps on the board when Rashad hesitantly raised his hand. "Yes, Rashad?" Mr. Chase asked, his voice laced with barely hidden annoyance. I think there's a mistake in step 3, Rashad said softly, his heart pounding in his chest. The room fell silent. Every head turned toward Rashad, and he could feel the weight of their collective gaze. Mr. Chase spun around, his face growing red. "And what exactly makes you think that?" he asked, his tone icy. Rashad swallowed hard. "Well, if you divide by 2x here, it cancels out the—" "That's enough," Mr. Chase snapped, cutting him off mid-sentence. "Let's not pretend you know more than the teacher." The class erupted in muffled laughter, and Rashad felt his cheeks burn with humiliation. He sank as low as he could in his seat, his fists clenched tightly under the desk. Tears threatened to spill, but he refused to cry. No matter how much it hurt, Rashad was determined not to let them see him break. If you're captivated by this story and want to hear what happens next, make sure to hit that subscribe button now. You won't want to miss the rest of Rashad's journey. Despite the sting of that moment, Rashad didn't let it define him. Deep down, he knew one thing to be true. Numbers were his sanctuary. They were his escape, his passion, his safe place. At home, he would immerse himself in the world of equations and formulas, spending hours solving problems far beyond the level of his peers. His mother, a single parent and former math teacher, had nurtured his love for mathematics from an early age, encouraging him to push boundaries and challenge himself. Since he was just a little boy, mathematics had been Rashad's passion. His mother would often remind him with a warm smile, "You've got a gift, Rashad. Don't ever let anyone dim your light." Those words stayed with him, a beacon of encouragement in moments of doubt. One evening, as Rashad sat at the kitchen table buried in his homework, his brow furrowed in frustration, his mother took notice. "Everything okay, honey?" she asked gently. "It's Mr. Chase," Rashad admitted, his voice tinged with a mix of hurt and frustration. "He acts like I'm not good enough to be in his class." His mother's expression hardened, but her voice remained calm. "Rashad, you don't need to prove anything to him. Just keep doing your best. The truth always comes out in the end." Her words gave Rashad a renewed sense of determination. The following week, Magnolia Hills announced its prestigious annual Math Leap competition. This was no ordinary event. It was a high-stakes contest, drawing the brightest minds from schools across the district. Mr. Chase, the faculty advisor for the team, stood at the front of the classroom with his usual air of authority, clipboard in hand. "Only the top 5 students will make the team," he declared, scanning the room. "If you're interested, sign up after class." Rashad hesitated for a moment. He knew he was good at math, better than good, actually. But he also knew Mr. Chase would likely doubt his abilities. Despite this, he refused to let fear hold him back. As the bell rang and his classmates filtered out, Rashad approached the teacher's desk. "I'd like to try out," Rashad said, his voice steady. Mr. Chase raised a skeptical eyebrow. "Are you sure about that?" "Yes," Rashad replied firmly, meeting his teacher's gaze. The teacher smirked, a hint of doubt lingering in his expression. "All right, Tate. Let's see what you've got." When the day of the tryouts arrived, Rashad was ready. He had poured countless hours into preparation, studying equations, memorizing formulas, and sharpening his mental math skills until they felt second nature. The test was grueling, designed to push even the most confident students to their limits. But Rashad breezed through it, his focus unshakable. When the results were posted later that week, Rashad's name stood proudly at the very top of the list. The numbers didn't lie, and even Mr. Chase couldn't hide his displeasure. Rashad was officially part of the team. The Math Leap competition was held in a grand auditorium, its seats packed with students, parents, and teachers. Magnolia Hills faced off against their fiercest rival, Crestview Academy. The atmosphere was electric, the stakes higher than ever. As the final round began, the room buzzed with tension. The last question, a challenging equation that even the judges found daunting, seemed impossible to solve. Crestview's team members approached the board one by one, attempting and failing to crack the problem. Then it was Rashad's turn. He took a deep breath and stepped up to the board, feeling the weight of every eye in the room on him. His heart pounded in his chest, but he forced himself to focus. The room was silent, so quiet he could hear the chalk scrape against the board as he worked through the equation. His mind raced, each calculation bringing him closer to the solution. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Rashad set down the chalk and stepped back. The judge studied his work intently, the tension in the room palpable. Then, with a nod, the judge announced, "Correct." The auditorium erupted in cheers and applause. Rashad allowed himself a small, proud smile, but his eyes immediately searched for Mr. Chase. For the first time, the teacher looked genuinely stunned. Back at school, Rashad was hailed as a hero. The classmates who had once mocked him now treated him with admiration and respect. But the biggest surprise came from Mr. Chase himself. After class one day, the teacher called Rashad over to his desk. His usual stern demeanor was replaced with something softer, almost apologetic. "I owe you an apology," Mr. Chase admitted, his voice uncharacteristically humble. "I underestimated you, Rashad. I was wrong." Rashad didn't quite know how to respond. He simply nodded and walked away, a sense of closure washing over him. Rashad's triumph became a turning point for Magnolia Hills Academy. It wasn't just about winning a competition, it was about breaking barriers, defying expectations, and challenging stereotypes. Rashad proved that talent, grit, and determination could outshine even the darkest shadows of prejudice. What do you think of Rashad's inspiring journey? Share your thoughts in the comments, And don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more stories that empower and inspire. Music fades out.